Major Ryan Cole snatched the radio from the operator's hand and barked into it like he owned the entire desert. Command, send us a real warrior, not some desk clerk, not some support asset, a real soldier who can actually fight. The radio crackled. Command replied, Echo 7 is already en route. Cole laughed, actually laughed, right there in the middle of a fire where men were bleeding. Echo 7, that's your answer. Nobody told him Echo 7 was a woman. Nobody told him she was about to save every single one of his men. Nobody told him he was about to spend the rest of his career regretting those 3 words. Before we go any further, if you believe that real strength doesn't always look the way people expect it, to subscribe to this channel right now and follow this story all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to where it all started. The Mojave Desert does not forgive weakness. It doesn't matter who you are, what rank you carry, how many combat deployments you have pinned to your chest. The desert strips all of that away. It takes everything that feels solid about a person, the confidence, the experience, the certainty, and it grinds it into dust under a sky so hot and white it makes you question whether the sun ever actually sets. Captain Ethan Walker had been out here before, many times. He knew the Mojave the way some men know the faces of their children. Every line, every shadow, every mood. He had trained in this desert. He had sweated through exercises here that left younger soldiers collapsed on the ground gasping for air while Walker kept walking. He was 41 years old, lean and weathered with gray threading through his dark hair and the kind of quiet in his eyes that comes not from peace, but from having seen too much. I had not expected tonight. Nobody had expected tonight. The mission had started as a classified field operation, a special operations training exercise that had been months in the planning. The kind of exercise where everything is controlled, where the parameters are set, where the worst-case scenario is still technically a scenario. Walker had briefed his team at 0400 hours that morning in the operations tent, moving his finger across the map with the practiced ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times. We insert here, he had said, pointing to a narrow canyon mouth that fed into a wide valley. We hold the observation post for 72 hours. We collect the designated intel packages, and we extract through the northern corridor before first light on day 3. Questions. There had been questions. There were always questions. His team was sharp 12 soldiers, including 2 communications specialists, 3 observers, a medical sergeant, and a small, quick reaction element led by Major Ryan Cole. They were experience motivated, and they trusted Walker the way soldiers trust a commander who has never left anyone behind. That trust had been built over years. It was real. What was also real, though, nobody understood it yet, was that someone outside the exercise parameters had decided to change the rules. They were 6 hours into the operation when it happened. Walker was at the observation post, reviewing the data feeds from his 2 forward teams, when the first explosion hit. Not a simulated explosion, not a pyrotechnic charge dropped from a trainer's position to simulate hostile contact. A real concussive blast that shook the ground under his boots and sent a wall of dust rolling across the valley floor. He was on the radio before the echo finished bouncing off the canyon walls. All elements, report status. Report status now. The responses came back fragmented, broken. His forward observation team on the eastern ridge, the 2 men who were supposed to be his eyes on the valley, came back with something that made Walker's stomach drop. Foxtrot 2 is down. I repeat, Foxtrot 2 is down. Jackson took shrapnel. He's stable, but he cannot move. And Sierra, I don't know where the contact came from. I don't have eyes on the threat. Walker pressed his radio and kept his voice flat. Understood. Hold position. Do not move until I give the word. He turned to his communications sergeant, a young man named Delgado who had the unfortunate habit of chewing the ends of his pens when he was anxious. Right now, Delgado had bitten through the cap entirely. Get me a clear channel to command, Walker said. Delgado worked the radio, adjusted frequencies, worked it again. Then he looked up with the expression of someone delivering news they don't want to deliver. Sir, we've got interference on the primary channel. Secondary is degraded. I can get a partial signal, but nothing clean. Define partial. Enough to transmit a message, maybe not enough to receive a clear reply. Walker absorbed this. He had been in situations before where communications failed. Communications always failed at the worst possible moment. That was almost a law of combat. The worse the situation, the less reliable the technology. He had learned long ago not to treat a failed radio as a catastrophe. It was a problem. Problems had solutions. Send it anyway, he said. Tell command we have a real-world hostile contact, 1 casualty. Communications degraded. Request immediate support and extraction guidance. Delgado nodded and started transmitting. That was when Major Ryan Cole came in. Cole was 37, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the absolute certainty of a man who had never seriously been wrong, or at least had never admitted it. He had been in the Army for 15 years, had done 2 deployments to Afghanistan and 1 to Iraq, and had the kind of combat record that looked genuinely impressive on paper. In person, Cole projected something slightly harder to define. It was not arrogance exactly, though it looked like arrogance from certain angles. It was more like the complete absence of doubt. Cole simply did not experience the internal question marks that most people carry around. He had decided long ago what things were, and what he had decided stayed decided. He had decided, for instance, that he knew exactly what kind of people won battles. And it was not complicated. It was not subtle. Winners were the ones who hit harder, moved faster, and stood taller. That was the truth Cole had carried through 15 years of military service, and that truth had served him well enough that he had no reason to question it. He came into the operations position with his rifle across his chest and dust on his face and the look of a man who already had a plan. Walker, sit rep. Walker gave it to him quickly. Forward team compromised, 1 casualty, communications degraded, hostile contact of unknown origin and unknown size. Cole listened. He nodded. Then he said, "We push east. We take fight to them. We don't sit here and let them control the tempo." Walker looked at him. "We don't know their position, Ryan. We don't know their numbers. And we have a man who can't move. We figure it out when we get there. That is not a plan. It's better than sitting still and letting them cut us off." And here was the thing about Cole that Walker had understood for years. The man was not stupid. He was not reckless in the way that cowards sometimes dressed up as bravery. Cole had genuine tactical experience. He had led men through real firefights and brought them home. The instinct to move, to press forward, to maintain aggression, that instinct had kept people alive more than once in Cole's career. But tonight, something about it felt wrong. Walker couldn't fully articulate why yet. It was less a thought than a feeling. The same low warning hum that had saved his life twice in Afghanistan, a hum that said, something about this picture doesn't add up. He looked at the map. He looked at the positions of his teams, his casualty, his degraded communications. He looked at where the explosion had come from, and he looked at the direction Cole wanted to move. And then very quietly, the warning hum got louder. If they moved east, they would be funneling into the canyon. They would be in a narrower space with less room to maneuver, and the high ground on both sides would belong to whoever was already up there. "Hold," Walker said. Cole stared at him. "Sir." "I said hold, Major. We are not moving until I understand the battlefield." The tension between them was the kind that builds in enclosed spaces between strong-willed people who respect each other, just enough not to explode, but not quite enough to fully let go. Cole set his jaw. He turned away and went to the edge of the operations position, staring out into the darkening desert with the barely contained energy of a man being asked to do something that felt wrong to everything he was. It was Delgado who spoke next, his voice careful and slightly too loud for how quiet the moment was. "Sir, I got a partial transmission from command." Walker crossed the space in 3 strides. He put on the headset. He listened to a broken signal that cut in and out like a radio station too far away, but he caught enough. He caught 3 words clearly enough to write them in his mind in permanent ink. "Echo 7, incoming." Walker lowered the headset. "Echo 7 is inbound," he said. Delgado looked at him. "Sir, who is Echo 7? "Support asset," Walker said. "That's all command is saying." Cole turned from the edge of the position. He crossed his arms. He looked at Walker with an expression that was not quite contempt, but was definitely not patience. "A support asset," Cole repeated. "That's what I said. We're pinned down. We have a man with shrapnel in him. We've got enemy forces in unknown numbers cutting off our extraction route, and command is sending us a support asset." He said those last two words the way a person says the wrong order at a restaurant, like a disappointment that was somehow also deeply predictable. Ryan, I'm not trying to be difficult, Ethan. I'm trying to say that we don't need support. We need a shooter. We need someone who can actually... He stopped. He reset. He picked up his own radio handset and pressed the transmit button. Command, this is Major Cole, acting senior officer on the ground. We require immediate combat reinforcement. We need experienced personnel, combat capable, not logistics, not support. Send us a real warrior over. The radio was quiet for a moment. Then Command replied, and the voice that came back was flat and completely unimpressed. Major Cole, Echo 7 is already en route. ETA 12 minutes. Over. Cole stared at the handset. Then he put it down on the table and said very slowly, 12 minutes, right, because nothing's going to happen in 12 minutes. As if on cue, and Walker would later think that the desert itself was listening, the sound of gunfire opened up from the northern perimeter. Not a single shot, a sustained burst. Then a second burst from a different direction. Then the radio crackled with Private Torres from the northern element, his voice tight as a wire. Contact north, 283, multiple shooters, they're hitting the vehicle position. We've got incoming fire on the vehicles. Cole looked at Walker. For 1 second, there was no argument between them. Just two soldiers in the same situation. And Cole's eyes said, what his mouth couldn't quite form, we need to do something now. Walker keyed his radio. All L elements, this is Sierra Actual. Hold positions. Defensive posture. Do not advance on contact. I say again, hold positions. Sir, Torres's voice came back strained. If they hit the vehicles, we lose our extraction. I know what we lose, Torres. Hold position. Conserve ammunition. I am working on solutions. Sierra Actual out. He put the radio down. Cole was still looking at him. I hope your solution shows up in 12 minutes, Cole said quietly. Walker didn't answer. He turned to his map and stared at it, and the warning hum in his chest was now less a hum and more a shout. The northern attack. The communications interference. The eastern explosion that had taken down his forward observers. These things were not random, they were sequenced. They were arriving in a pattern, not the random pattern of an enemy trying to overwhelm, but the deliberate pattern of someone trying to move. Move them east. That was what Cole had wanted to do. Move east into the canyon, into the kill zone that Walker could now see clearly had been waiting for them all along. Someone out there knew exactly how they would respond, and they were using that knowledge against them. Walker was still staring at his map when the sound of a vehicle reached the operations position. Not from the direction of the firefight. From the south, a single set of headlights cutting through the desert dark. Everyone turned, the vehicle stopped, the engine cut, the headlights went off, a door opened. Cole had moved to the edge of the sandbag barrier. He stood there watching the vehicle with his arms crossed. Walker watched him watch it. Watched the moment when Cole registered who was stepping out. Not a massive veteran with the jaw like a cinder block. Not a Tier 1 operator with a chest rig loaded for a week of sustained contact. Not anyone who fit the profile of the word warrior the way Cole carried that word around. A woman, young, slight, moving with a quietness that was not uncertainty. It was more like someone who had long ago stopped needing to announce her arrival to feel real. She was in standard kit, nothing theatrical about it. She carried a case in one hand and her rifle slung across her back, and she looked at the operations position the way a plumber looks at a burst pipe, not with drama but with assessment. She walked to Walker. Captain Walker, she said. Her voice was calm, not performance calm, actually calm. Sergeant Bennett, Walker said, welcome to the mess. I've seen the partial comms, she said. Before I came in, I was watching from the ridge on approach for about 4 minutes. I need to ask you a few questions. Ask. And then Cole spoke. I didn't shout it. He almost would have been easier to deal with if he had shouted it. Instead, he said it in that particular tone of absolute and unquestioning certainty. The tone of a man who didn't realize he was making the worst mistake of his life. This is what Command has sent us, he said. After everything I requested, after everything I specifically asked for. He looked at Bennett. He looked at her without bothering to disguise what was in his expression. I asked for a real warrior, and they sent us someone who needs protection. Bennett didn't look at Cole. She looked at the map. Cole waited for a reaction. He had said it loud enough that everyone could hear. The soldiers nearby Torres Delgado Martinez, the others who had filtered into the operations position as the perimeter gunfire had settled into an uneasy pause. They all heard it. They were all watching. Bennett reached past Cole and put her finger on the map. "This ridge," she said to Walker, "the one running northeast of the valley. What's up there?" Walker looked at the map. "Abandoned observation tower from the original exercise setup. We didn't man it because it wasn't in our operational parameters." "They're using it," Bennett said, "not as a shooting position, as a relay point. Someone up there is watching your entire team and feeding information to the attack elements. That's how they're staying one step ahead. That's why your communications are degraded. They're not just interfering with your signals. They're using the same frequency band to run their own coordination." There was a pause. Walker looked at her. He looked at her for a long moment, not the way he had looked at the map, but the way a person looks at something they are recalibrating their understanding of. "That's why every contact has been perfectly timed," he said slowly. "Yes, the explosion that hit your forward team wasn't aimed at your team. It was aimed at your observer position. They didn't want your observers seeing what they were setting up in the valley. The northern attack isn't an assault, it's a herding motion. They want you to move east." Cole stared at her. The absolute certainty in his face had developed very slightly, a crack. Not a big crack, but a crack. "Into the canyon," Walker said. "Into the canyon," Bennett confirmed, "which is where their main element is positioned. They've been patient, they've been methodical, and they've been counting on your team doing exactly what any experienced unit would do when hit from the north advance east to break contact and find high ground." Silence. Walker turned to Cole. Cole was looking at Bennett with an expression that was complex and difficult to fully read. There was resistance in it, and something else underneath the resistance, something that hadn't quite been named yet. "You saw all of this," Cole said. "From a ridge approach, in 4 minutes. "I was looking for it," Bennett said simply. "What do you need?" Walker asked. She told him. She needed the abandoned tower. She needed a clear channel that Delgado could maintain on secondary frequencies to bypass the interference. She needed Walker to hold his entire unit in place, no advances, no reactive movements, no matter what the next contact looked like. And she needed everyone to trust her for the next several hours. That last request was the hardest one in the room. Cole looked at Walker. The look said, "You can't be serious." Walker looked back. His look said, "Watch me." "Sergeant Bennett gets everything she needs," Walker said, and his voice had the particular quality of a decision that is not open to further discussion. "You run the tower operation. Delgado supports your comms. The rest of the unit holds defensive position." He paused. "Any questions?" Nobody spoke. Bennett picked up her equipment case. Cole watched her. Something was moving in his expression, something uncomfortable and unnamed. He had asked for a real warrior. He had said it out loud in front of his men, in a voice he hadn't bothered to soften because it hadn't occurred to him to soften it. And this woman had walked in, looked at his map for 30 seconds, and told him something about the battlefield that he, with his 15 years, his deployments, his combat record, had not seen. He watched her walk toward the tower. "I didn't say anything." Walker came to stand beside him, not close enough to be confrontational, just close enough to be heard without the others listening. "She's right about the canyon, Ryan," Walker said quietly. "You know she's right." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "I know," he finally said. And in those 2 words, those flat and stripped down 2 words, was something much larger. Not an apology, not yet, but the beginning of something shifting inside a man who had not expected to have something shift tonight. Above them, moving through the dark, with her equipment case and her rifle and her absolute unhurried certainty, Sergeant Claire Bennett, Echo 7, climbed toward the abandoned tower. Below her, a battle waited. Below her, 12 soldiers held their positions because a captain believed in something he couldn't fully explain. And below her, a major stood in the dark and felt for the first time in a very long time that he might not know everything he thought he knew. The desert was watching, and it does not forgive, but sometimes, just sometimes, it teaches. The tower loomed against the night sky, dark and still. Bennett reached the base of it, tested the structure. With one firm hand, looked upward at the rusted ladder climbing into shadow. She started climbing. Halfway up, a shot cracked out from the eastern ridge, not aimed at her, aimed at the operations position below, another probing attack meant to provoke, meant to push. She didn't stop climbing. She didn't speed up either. She simply continued at exactly the pace she had started, hand over hand, boot over boot, steady as a heartbeat. And when she reached the top and looked out across the dark valley that the enemy thought they owned, she set down her case, opened it, and began. The 50 caliber rifle was not what anyone in that valley expected. It was not what the enemy expected either. It was not the weapon itself that mattered. It was the mind behind it. And in the Mojave Desert, in the dark with the stars burning cold overhead and 12 men holding their breath below, and an enemy that had planned this entire night down to the last detail, that mind had just found the one thing the enemy had not planned for. A warrior who didn't need anyone to know she was there, until it was already over. The first thing Bennett did when she reached the top of that tower was nothing. She did not set up her rifle. She did not open her case. She did not scan the valley with any optic. She simply stood at the edge of the platform, looked out into the dark, and breathed. Below, Delgado was watching her through his night vision monocular from the operations position. He reported what he saw to Walker in a low voice, like he wasn't sure whether he was confused or impressed. "Sir, she's just standing there." Walker looked up at the tower. "Let her stand. She's not doing anything." "She's doing more than you think, Sergeant." Delgado lowered his monocular. He didn't say anything else, but the expression on his face was the expression of someone filing something away for later, something they weren't sure they understood yet, but weren't ready to dismiss. 40 seconds. That was how long Bennett stood still at the top of that tower. 40 seconds of doing what looked like nothing to everyone watching from below. 40 seconds of reading every piece of the desert that was available to her, the wind direction shifting slightly from northwest to west, the way the sound of the firefight echoed differently off the eastern canyon wall than it should have. If the enemy were positioned where Walker's team assumed the faint mechanical rhythm, underneath the ambient noise that didn't belong to Walker's unit and didn't belong to the desert. She had trained herself to hear that rhythm, the way musicians train themselves to hear a note that's slightly off. Most people couldn't hear it at all. Bennett heard it the way she heard her own heartbeat. She turned back to her case and opened it. The Barrett M107 5E caliber rifle was not a subtle weapon. It weighed nearly 30 pounds. It was nearly 5 feet long. It fired a round that could punch through an engine block at a range that made most people uncomfortable, even to think about. When soldiers saw it for the first time, they usually had one of two reactions. Either their eyes went wide and they said something like, "Wow," or their eyes went wide and they said something like, "What is that doing here?" The soldiers at the operations position had the second reaction. Martinez, who had been crouching near the sandbag north wall, watching the valley for movement, turned when he heard the case open. He looked up at the tower. He looked at the rifle. He looked at Walker. "Sir," he said, "is she going to fire that thing?" "I expect so," Walker said. "That's a 50 cal. "I know what it is, Martinez. From that range she'll be able to—" "I know what she'll be able to do. Watch your sector." Martinez turned back to his sector, but he kept glancing up at the tower. They all did. The rifle up there had changed the emotional temperature of the operations position in a way that was hard to pin down. It wasn't confidence exactly. It was more like something had shifted in the balance of the night, and none of them were sure yet which direction it had shifted. The only person who wasn't looking at the tower was Cole. Cole was sitting on an ammunition crate near the operations map, his elbows on his knees, his hands loosely clasped in front of him, and he was staring at the ground, not in defeat. Cole didn't do defeat, but he was staring at the ground in the way a person stares at it when they are having a conversation inside themselves that they're not ready to have out loud. He had been doing that since Bennett walked away. Walker came and sat on the crate beside him. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat there, and the sounds of the desert filled the space between them, the distant crack of sporadic fire from the northern element, the low static of Delgado's radio work, the soft movement of soldiers in defensive positions. Cole spoke first. "She could be wrong," he said. Walker looked at him. "She could be. The tower, the relay, the canyon, all of it. She pulled that from a 4-minute ridge observation. It could be wrong." "It could be." A long pause. "But you don't think it's wrong," Cole said. Walker exhaled slowly. "No, I don't." Cole nodded once slowly, the way a man nods when he's accepting something that costs him something to accept. "How long have you known about her?" "Heard of Echo 7 about 6 months ago," Walker said. After that situation in the Bakken Valley exercise, you remember hearing about that unit that got completely turned around by a simulated adversary, lost their communication relay, ended up in a holding pattern for 16 hours. Cole frowned. I heard about it. Some kind of precision asset bailed them out. Echo 7 bailed them out. Single shooter elevated position, 19 hours of sustained precision, overwatch. She didn't just cover them. She controlled the entire adversary movement pattern for the last 8 hours. Forced them into corridors that the other unit's QRF could exploit. Walker paused. General Reynolds himself wrote the after-action summary. Cole was quiet, his jaw tightened. I didn't know it was her, he said. No, most people don't. Another pause. I said something I shouldn't have said, Cole said. He said it the same way he said everything directly without theatrical weight, just a statement of fact. But the fact itself was significant coming from Cole, and Walker understood that. Yeah, Walker said, you did. Cole looked at the ground again. He rubbed the back of his neck with one hand, a gesture Walker had seen from him before Cole's version of visible discomfort, which was the closest Cole came to visible anything. She didn't react, Cole said. I noticed. Most people would have reacted. Most people, Walker agreed, haven't decided that proving something to Ryan Cole is worth their time. Cole looked at him sharply. Walker almost smiled. Almost. I mean that as a compliment, Major. Cole held his look for a moment, then turned away. He stared at the tower for the first time since Bennett had climbed it. The Barrett was visible at the parapet now, bipod deployed, Bennett behind it, in a position that from this distance looked almost relaxed. She's not even using the sandbags, Cole said. Walker looked. He was right. Bennett had not positioned herself behind any cover. She was lying prone on the tower platform, fully exposed, rifle forward. Cole seemed to find this either baffling or alarming, possibly both. What is she doing? She's exposed up there. One shooter on the east ridge sees her position and she moved the rifle 3 times before she settled, Walker said. I watched her. Each position she tested was visible from a different sector. She chose that one because the eastern ridge sightline is blocked by the tower's own structure from the angle the enemy observer would have to use. Cole stared at him. You watched all that from here? No, she told me before she went up. Cole turned back to the tower with an expression that had moved from conflict into something closer to genuine reckoning. The man who had said, send me a real warrior, was now sitting in the dark, looking at someone who was dismantling his understanding of what that word meant, one detail at a time. Up in the tower, Bennett had her eye to the scope. The scope on the Barrett was a Night Force ATCR, a piece of precision optics that in the hands of a trained shooter turned the darkness into something navigable. Bennett had spent more hours behind this scope than she had spent doing almost anything else in her adult life. She knew its quirks the way she knew her own hands. She knew how the reticle breathed with her respiratory cycle. She knew the exact point of pressure that would resolve a shifting image into something stable. She was not looking for targets yet. She was looking for information. The valley below her was dark, but dark was not the same as empty. Dark contained things. Dark contained the faint thermal bloom of an engine that had been running recently. Dark contained the subtle movement signature of a human body's shifting weight in a concealed position. Dark contained the reflective geometry of optical equipment, a scope, a spotter's glass, a relay antenna, catching starlight at an angle the person behind it never thought to consider. Bennett found the first one at the 11-minute mark. She found it because she was not looking for what a soldier would look like in a concealed position. She was looking for what the position itself would have to do in order to function. The enemy observer relay needed a clean line of sight to 3 things: the operations position, the northern contact element, and the canyon mouth to the east. Those 3 requirements put the relay into a very specific geometry. Once you understood the geometry, the possible positions collapsed from thousands to dozens, and from dozens to a handful, and from a handful to 1. She pressed her radio transmit button once. A single click, the prearranged signal. Below, Delgado received the click and looked at Walker. She's got something. Walker nodded. He picked up his handset. Echo 7 Sierra Actual, report. Bennett's voice came back quiet, measured, carrying the particular flatness of someone describing something they are actively watching. I have the relay position. East face of the ridge, approximately 200 meters north of the original forward observer position. It's a two-man team, one observing, one on comms equipment. They are currently feeding movement data on your northern element. The northern attack is coordinating in real time. Walker processed this. 200 meters north of the forward observer position, right where the explosion had pushed his team out of hours ago. Can you take the position? He asked. A pause, not a hesitant pause, a calculating one. Not yet, Bennett said. If I take them now, the main element loses their relay and they'll shift to backup protocols. I don't know what their backup protocols are. If I move too early, I risk pushing the main element into an attack before you're ready to respond. Cole had moved to Walker's side. He was listening. His arms were crossed, but there was nothing dismissive in the posture now. He was listening the way soldiers listen when they're taking information seriously. So we wait, Walker said. We gather, Bennett said. There's a difference. While I'm watching the relay, I can track the patrol routes around the canyon entrance. Give me 20 minutes and I'll have their main elements pattern mapped. Cole leaned toward Walker and said quietly, 20 minutes is a long time if they decide to push the northern element harder. Walker nodded. Into the radio, Echo 7 northern element is taking pressure. What's your read on escalation risk? Another pause, shorter this time. The northern attack is harassment, Bennett said. It's designed to feel like escalation without actually being escalation. They're spending ammunition and noise to keep your northern soldiers reactive and distracted. They don't want your northern element to stop and think. They want them in a crouch responding to stimulus, not reading the bigger picture. A brief silence. Tell your northern element to stop returning fire. Walker blinked. Say again. Stop returning fire. The moment they stop shooting back, the northern attackers lose their primary feedback mechanism. Right now, every time your soldiers shoot, they're telling the relay team that the harassment is working. If your soldiers go quiet, the enemy coordinator doesn't know if the harassment pushed them to move or if they've shifted to a different response. It introduces uncertainty into their timeline. Walker looked at Cole. Cole stared at him for a full second. Then he said, "That is either insane or brilliant." Those two things, Walker said, are not mutually exclusive. He keyed his radio for the northern element. Taurus Sierra Actual. Taurus's voice came back tense-clipped. Go ahead, sir. Ceasefire. All elements, northern perimeter, cease fire immediately. Conserve ammunition, hold position. Do not respond to incoming fire unless directly assaulted with a breach attempt. Acknowledge. A very long pause. Sir, Taurus started. Acknowledge the order, Sergeant. The pause stretched thin. Acknowledge, sir, ceasing fire. But, sir, if they push up. If they push up, you will know it. Until they push, you hold. Sierra Actual out. Walker lowered the radio. Around him, the soldiers at the operations position were very quiet. Delgado had stopped chewing his pen. Martinez had turned from his sector to look at Walker with an expression that walked a careful line between faith and genuine alarm. Cole said nothing. The desert went quiet except for the incoming fire from the north, which continued for about 90 seconds. Sporadic probing, increasingly uncertain. And then, almost as if the enemy couldn't quite believe what was happening, it slowed down and stopped. The silence was enormous. It was the kind of silence that has weight and temperature. Delgado whispered, they stopped. Yes, Walker said. Why did they stop? Because we stopped, Walker said, and now they don't know what that means. Up in the tower, Bennett heard the silence settle across the valley and felt the specific satisfaction of a hypothesis confirmed. She had been right about the feedback loop. The northern attackers had been working off of response signals, the sound of return fire, telling them their pressure was working. When the return fire stopped, their certainty evaporated. Their coordinator at the relay position would be generating questions right now. Questions took time to answer. Time was the one resource Bennett needed most. She went back to her scope. The canyon mouth was 2,400 meters away. For most shooters, that was the end of the conversation. 2,400 meters in darkness, accounting for wind, for temperature, differential between the valley floor and the higher air, where the round would travel for the curvature of the round's arc over that distance, most shooters would say impossible. Most shooters would ask for a closer position. Bennett had already done the calculation. She had done it on the drive-in using weather data and terrain maps that she'd pulled before the mission. She had done it again, refined it while she stood still for 40 seconds at the top of this tower. The round would drop over a specific arc. The wind would push it a specific direction. The temperature differential would affect velocity by a specific amount. None of these variables were guesses. They were known quantities. They had solutions. She adjusted her scope. Then she went still and let herself breathe and kept her eye on the canyon mouth. At the operations position, Cole was doing something Walker hadn't seen him do in years. He was pacing, not agitated pacing, the kind that signals anxiety. Cole would have died before admitting to anxiety. But a thinking pace, short, slow circuits of the small operations space, his eyes moving from the map to the tower to the northern perimeter and back. Walker watched him. "Say what you're thinking," Walker said. Cole stopped. He looked at the map. His finger traced the eastern canyon. "If she's right about the main element, if they're staged in the canyon, waiting for us to funnel in, then the moment we don't come, they have a decision to make. They can either push out of the canyon and attack across open ground, which disadvantages them, or they can hold and wait, which only works if they believe their plan is still intact." He paused. "If she takes out the relay, they lose their information about us. They won't know if we're moving or holding. They won't know if we've figured them out." "Right," Walker said. "So the question is whether they push out of uncertainty or hold out of discipline. And the answer to that question," Walker said slowly, "determines when she shoots." Cole nodded. He was thinking hard, and Walker could see. It could see the machinery of Cole's tactical mind working in a way it rarely had to work. Because most situations Cole had encountered yielded to the direct approach. Hit harder. Move faster. This situation was asking him to think differently. It was asking him to play a longer game. "She knows," Cole said, "not a question." "She knows," Walker confirmed. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then in a voice that was several decibels lower than his normal register, he said, "I've been underestimating this kind of work for a long time, haven't I?" Walker looked at him. "You've been very good at the kind of work you value." "That's a diplomatic answer." "You're a major. I have to be diplomatic." Cole almost laughed. It was a small sound, almost involuntary, the kind of sound that escapes before a person decides whether to let it out. He caught it and put it back. But Walker had heard it. The radio clicked twice. Bennett's signal. Something new. Walker was on the handset instantly. "Echo 7, go." "Movement in the canyon," Bennett said. Her voice was exactly as level as it had been an hour ago, but there was a specific quality underneath it now. Not excitement, nothing so undisciplined as that, but something like the coiling of a spring. Something about to release. "They are reassessing. I'm seeing a forward element moving toward the canyon mouth. They're sending scouts." "How many?" "2. They're looking for information about why you went quiet. They want to know if you moved." Walker understood immediately. If the scouts report back that we're still in position, the main element will know their plan is still intact and they'll initiate the push, Bennett said. If the scouts don't report back, the main element has a crisis. Cole was looking at Walker with wide eyes and a question on his face. Walker keyed the radio. "Can you take the scouts without alerting the main element?" The pause this time was the longest yet. "I can take one quietly," Bennett said, "but not two at this distance without the sound reaching the canyon. One shot at this range with wind from the northwest will sound to anyone in the canyon like it came from the east, like it came from their own side." Walker stared at the radio. Cole grabbed his arm and turned him. "She just told you," Cole said under his breath, "that she can make a .50 caliber shot at over 2,000 meters and have it sound like it came from the wrong direction." "I heard what she said." "Walker, that's not—" Cole stopped. He ran a hand over his face. "That's not a thing that people do. Echo 7 apparently does." Another radio click. Bennett again. "I need a decision, sir. The scouts are moving. I have approximately 4 minutes before they reach a position with line of sight to your operations post. If they see you're still in position, they transmit. I need to know, do I engage?" Walker looked at his map. He looked at his soldiers. He thought about Torres and his team on the northern perimeter, holding their fire in the dark, trusting a voice on the radio that told them to stop shooting. He thought about Jackson somewhere on the eastern ridge, wounded waiting. He thought about the canyon. He said, "Echo 7, you are weapons free. Your call, your timing." The longest silence of the night. Then Bennett's voice, quieter than before, carrying something in it that Walker could not name, not hesitation, not fear, but the acknowledgement of wait. "Understood. Stand by." At the operations position, everyone stopped moving. Delgado stopped breathing, or seemed to. Martinez turned from his sector. Even Cole, who had been pacing, went completely still. The desert held everything it was holding. And then from the direction of the tower, a sound that the Mojave Desert had not heard before in this particular patch of dark. A single enormous concussive crack that hit the night air like a physical object and rolled outward in every direction and then was swallowed by the desert. The way the desert swallows everything. One shot, 2,400 meters, in the dark. Delgado made a sound that was not a word. Seconds later, Bennett's voice came over the radio. Scout 1 is down. Scout 2 has stopped. He doesn't know where the sound came from. Walker exhaled. He's standing still. Bennett continued watching through her scope. He's looking east. He thinks it came from his own side. A pause. He's pulling out a radio. Walker's hand tightened on his handset. He's transmitting to the main element, Bennett said. He's telling them something happened. He doesn't know what. Cole grabbed the map and stared at the canyon mouth position. If the main element thinks something happened to their own scout, they'll go dark, Bennett said over the radio, answering Cole's half-spoken thought as if she could hear it. They'll suspend operations until they can verify. The main element coordinator will go silent, which means the relay goes silent, which means your communications interference drops. Walker looked at Delgado. Delgado was already at his radio equipment. His hands moved fast. He tried the primary channel. A clear signal came back. Not degraded, not fragmented. Clear, sharp, real. Sir, Delgado said, and his voice was about 3 years younger than it had been an hour ago. Sir, I've got command. Clear signal. I've got them. Walker crossed to him in 2 steps and took the handset. Command, Sierra Actual. Sierra Actual requesting update on our tactical situation and confirmation of support assets in theater. Command came back immediately clear as a bell, and the voice on the other end was senior, the particular cadence of someone who has rank and is using it. Sierra Actual, this is General Reynolds' operations center. We've been trying to reach you for the past hour. What is your status? Walker felt something release in his chest. He hadn't known he was holding it until it let go. Command, we have 1 casualty stable, non-critical. We have a hostile element staged in the Eastern Canyon, approximately battalion minus strength, with a 2-man relay team on the East Ridge providing real-time targeting data. We believe the hostile element is using a pre-planned funnel attack. We have Echo 7 in overwatch position, weapons free. We are holding defensive posture and do not require reinforcement at this time. A brief silence on the command end. Sierra Actual, confirm you have Echo 7 active and in position. Confirmed. Another pause shorter. Copy that, Sierra Actual. You're in good hands. Command out. Walker lowered the handset. Cole was watching him. Good hands, Cole said slowly. Command just told you you're in good hands. That's what they said. Cole looked at the tower. He looked at it for a long time. And then he did something that Walker had never in 6 years of working alongside this man seen him do without being asked. He picked up his radio and keyed it. Echo 7, this is Major Cole. A pause, then Bennett's voice. Go ahead, Major. Cole pressed his lips together for a moment. He looked at the ground. He looked at the tower. He made the face of a man swallowing something large and necessary. Good call on the ceasefire, he said. I wouldn't have thought of it. The radio was quiet. Then very simply, understood, Major. Not thank you, not you're welcome, not the slightest movement toward the moment, not the slightest concession to it. Just understood. Walker didn't say anything. He turned to his map because Cole needed the moment to be unremarked upon. He understood that. But privately, quietly, without letting anyone see it, Walker felt something that he hadn't felt since they landed in this desert tonight. He felt like they were going to be okay. Up in the tower, Bennett was already moving. She had the relay team in her scope again. The 2-man team on the East Ridge was reacting to their coordinator's silence. She could see it in the way they moved, the shift in body language from purposeful to uncertain. The coordinator below them in the canyon had gone dark, and now they didn't know whether to maintain position or pull back. This was the window. Not a large window. Maybe 3 minutes before the main element made a decision in the absence of information. 3 minutes before uncertainty resolved itself into action of some kind, and action was the one thing Bennett could not fully predict. She let out half a breath, held the rest. The wind was still northwest. She had adjusted for it. The temperature had dropped 2 degrees in the last hour. She had adjusted for that too. The bipod was steady, her body was still. She thought briefly about the major standing below her in the dark saying good call on the ceasefire, and she thought about how long it must have taken him to say that and how much more it cost him than anyone watching would understand. She filed it away. She went back to the scope. The relay team had made a decision. They were packing up. They were preparing to move. Bennett understood immediately. If they moved, they would reposition. If they repositioned, she lost them in the dark, and the main element in the canyon got their relay back. If the relay came back online, the communications interference returned, and Walker's unit went blind again. She had seconds, not minutes, seconds. Her finger found the trigger. She breathed. And the desert, which does not forgive weakness, was about to be reminded that it also does not slow down for people who are not ready. But Echo 7 was always ready. She had been ready since before she climbed the ladder, since before she opened her case, since before she drove into this desert in the dark and stood at the base of a tower with a situation that everyone else called impossible. She had been ready since the moment Major Cole said, "Send us a real warrior," and she had heard it through the briefing channel and had simply thought, "I know." Her finger pressed. The night cracked open. The second shot from the tower was different from the first. The first shot had been surgical. Precise. One round, one target designed to create confusion without confirmation. A scalpel. The second shot was something else entirely. It was the moment the scalpel became a statement, the moment Echo 7 stopped gathering information and started rewriting the rules of the night. The relay team on the East Ridge had been packing their equipment for less than 40 seconds when the second round found them. At the operations position, below the crack of the Barrett rolled across the valley and hit the sandbag walls like something physical. Delgado flinched. Martinez pressed himself flat against the northern wall for one involuntary second before he caught himself and straightened. Torres over the radio from the northern perimeter said one word that wasn't a military word at all before he recovered his composure. But Walker didn't flinch. He was already on the radio. Echo 7 status. Bennett's voice came back in under 3 seconds. Relay team is down. Both operators. Equipment destroyed. Main element in the canyon has lost all communication with their forward coordination structure. They are now operating blind. Walker let out a slow breath. Around him, he could feel the temperature of the operations position change. Not physically, not the desert air, but the temperature of the people in it. The shift from compressed dread to something that still wasn't safety, but was adjacent to it. Something that felt like the balance tilting just slightly, just enough. Cole stepped to his side. How long before the main element decides to move without the relay? Walker keyed the radio. Echo 7, in your assessment, what is the main element's timeline before they commit to action without relay confirmation? The answer came back faster than Walker expected, which told him Bennett had already done the calculation before he asked. They've been trained to hold for relay confirmation before the final push. Without it, their commander has 2 options. Wait for comms to restore, which they won't because the relay is gone. Or improvise. A disciplined commander holds. An aggressive one moves. A beat. Based on the pattern of their attacks tonight, their commander is aggressive. Cole heard that. How long, y'all? 8 to 12 minutes, Bennett said. Before he decides waiting costs more than moving. 8 to 12 minutes, Walker looked at his map. He looked at the canyon mouth. He looked at the space between it and his unit's position, open ground flat, no natural cover for either side. If they push out of the canyon, Walker said, they lose the terrain advantage. Yes, Bennett said, but they have numbers. Yes. So we need to make open ground more expensive for them than staying in the canyon. A pause from the tower. Then in the tone of someone who has been waiting for the right question, yes, that's exactly what we need to do. Cole turned to Walker. The conflict that had been visible in the Major's face since Bennett arrived, the resistance, the reckoning, the slow, difficult work of revising a self-image, had mostly resolved itself into something cleaner. Now, not admiration exactly. Cole was not built for easy admiration, but something functional had replaced the resistance. A working relationship with a reality he hadn't chosen, but was choosing now to accept. Tell me what she needs, Cole said. Walker looked at him. 4 words from Ryan Cole that 24 hours ago. Walker would have bet money he would never hear in relation to a 28-year-old female precision sergeant. 4 words that cost Cole more than he would ever say. Walker turned back to the radio. Echo 7, What do you need from us to make the open ground expensive? Bennett's answer came in three parts, delivered in the flat, efficient cadence of someone reading from a list they had memorized before they ever arrived. First, I need your northern element repositioned. Torres's team moves 50 meters west of current position in the next 5 minutes. Not because I need them for firepower. I need them to change the silhouette profile of your defensive line. When the main element scouts the canyon mouth, I want them to see a position that looks like it's shifted west. It creates a false assumption about where your heaviest response will come from. Walker keyed the radio for Torres immediately. He didn't explain. He gave the order. Torres acknowledged with barely a pause. This time something had changed in the northern element's willingness to comply without question. Bennett had earned something from Torres' team with the ceasefire call, whether they could articulate it or not. Second, Bennett continued, I need your communications, Sergeant, to transmit on the primary channel in 2 minutes. Not a real message, a fragment, something that sounds like coordination that got cut off. I want the main element to hear noise on Walker's comms and believe the interference restored partially. It creates ambiguity about whether their relay is actually gone. Delgado was already looking at Walker with wide eyes and what appeared to be genuine professional enthusiasm breaking through the stress of the evening. I can do that, sir. I know exactly how to make a fragment transmission sound authentic. Walker almost smiled. Do it. Third, Bennett said, I need you to turn on the northern perimeter vehicle lights for 30 seconds. Not headlights, running lights, and then turn them off. Silence at the operations position. Cole spoke first. She wants us to light up the northern vehicles. For 30 seconds, Walker said. That tells anyone watching exactly where the vehicles are. That, Walker said slowly, is possibly the point. He keyed the radio. Echo 7, confirm you want the enemy main element to know the vehicle positions. I want them to think the vehicles are preparing to move north, Bennett said. A defensive unit turning on running lights at night usually means one thing: they're getting ready to relocate. If the main element commander sees that, he'll believe your unit is reacting to the northern pressure. He'll think you're pulling back. He'll believe his plan is still working, just on a slightly different timeline. The operations position went very quiet. Cole put both hands flat on the map table. He stared at the map. He stared at the canyon. He stared at the northern perimeter position. And then he looked up and he said in a voice that had nothing in it but the naked sound of respect finally given without condition, she's running a deception operation. Yes, Walker said, from a tower with a rifle, alone. Yes, while simultaneously maintaining overwatch, managing our communication strategy, controlling our unit movements, and predicting enemy commander psychology. Cole straightened. He pressed his lips together. This is the most complete operational picture I have seen produced by a single asset in 15 years. Walker said nothing. He let that sit where Cole had put it. Then he picked up his radio. Echo 7, we're executing your 3 requirements. Vehicle lights on my mark in 2 minutes. Delgado transmits fragment in 90 seconds. Torres is already moving. Confirm your tracking. Tracking, Bennett said. And Captain, when the main element moves, they'll send a scout element first, 2 to 4 personnel, canyon mouth, to approximately 500 meters forward. They'll be looking for your defensive line and trying to confirm the vehicle movement. They need to reach 300 meters from the canyon mouth before I can let them report anything. Because if they report before 300 meters, the main element holds. Because if they reach 300 meters without incident, the main element commander will believe the scouts are clear and commit the full push. And a committed full push on open ground is exactly where I need them. Walker's hand tightened on the radio. He understood. It was elegant the way a trap is elegant, not in spite of its danger, but because of the precision of it. You're going to let them come, he said. I'm going to let them come, Bennett confirmed. And then I'm going to take apart their command structure, one decision at a time. Cole was staring at the radio now. He had the expression of a man watching something happen that is recalibrating every category he uses to think about things. Walker gave the orders. 90 seconds later, Delgado transmitted his fragment, a broken, convincing half-sentence about northern movement that sounded exactly like what it was supposed to sound like. 30 seconds after that, the northern vehicle running lights came on, held for 30 seconds, went off. Then they waited. The desert was silent. The silence had a different quality now than the silence of an hour ago. An hour ago, the silence had been the silence of being trapped, heavy pressing, directional with threat at every edge. This silence was the silence of a set piece, a prepared position. The silence of hunters who have stopped moving because they are already in place. 7 minutes passed. At the 7-minute mark, Bennett's voice came through the radio with a single word that reset every nerve ending in the operations position. Movement. Walker gripped the handset. Report. Canyon mouth, scout element. I count 3 personnel. A pause of 3 seconds that felt much longer. They're moving northeast. They're heading for your vehicle position, not your defensive line. They took the bait on the running lights. Cole moved to Walker's side without being asked. He didn't say anything. He just stood there close enough to hear the radio, close enough to be in it with Walker. Range to scouts, Walker said. 1,200 meters from the canyon mouth, moving at a cautious pace. Another pause. Main element is visible at the canyon entrance. Commander is forward. He's watching personally. He's invested. He wants to see this work. That detail, the commander at the forward edge, watching, told Walker everything about what kind of person they were dealing with. This was not a patient commander who directed from depth. This was someone who leaned forward, who needed to see the result of his own plan with his own eyes. That was useful. That was exploitable. He almost said so to Cole, but Cole got there first. He's forward, Cole said quietly. He's exposed. Echo 7, Walker said into the radio. Enemy commander is at the canyon mouth. What's your range? 2,100 meters, Bennett said. Inside my envelope. But I won't take him yet. Cole looked at Walker. Walker looked at the radio. Say again, Echo 7. I won't take him yet, Bennett repeated, patient, unhurried. If I take the commander now, the scout element will scatter and the main element will go to ground. I lose control of their movement. If I wait until the scouts are committed and the main element is in the open, I take the commander at the moment of maximum disruption. The unit won't have time to regroup. They'll have a leadership vacuum at the worst possible moment. Cole exhaled slowly. He was quiet for a moment. Then he turned away and walked 3 steps and stopped facing the northern perimeter. And Walker could see his shoulders in the set of them, the set of a man processing something that requires physical stillness to process. He turned back. She's not shooting when she can. She's shooting when it matters. Yes, Walker said. The difference between those two things, Cole said, and his voice had changed again, dropped lower, become quieter than Walker had heard it tonight, is the difference between a fighter and a commander. Walker looked at him. He let that sit. At the operations position, the next 4 minutes were the longest 4 minutes of the night. The scout element was moving. Bennett was tracking them, calling their progress in 30-second intervals, and each update landed at the operations position like a stone into water, clear, precise, spreading outward into stillness. Scouts at 800 meters from canyon mouth, 30 seconds. Scouts at 600, they're scanning your vehicle position. They can see the vehicle outlines, but not movement. They're slowing down. 30 seconds. Main element is pushing forward. Commander has given the signal. They're committing to the push before the scouts reach 300 meters. He's impatient. A 2-second pause. That's a mistake on his part. Walker felt it, the shift, the pivot point, the moment where everything that had been preparation became action. All elements, Sierra Actual, Walker said into his radio. Stand by, do not move, do not fire, hold your positions. He heard Torres acknowledge from the north. He heard the QRF element, Martinez and 2 others on the southern perimeter, acknowledge in clipped, tense syllables. He lowered the radio and looked at Cole. Cole was looking at the tower. She's going to take the commander, Cole said. Yes. And then she controls everything that happens next. Cole nodded. He didn't speak again. He stood beside Walker, and Walker became aware in that moment of something that he would later think about during quieter days. The way 2 people can stand in the same place and be in entirely different moments. Walker was in the present moment, tactical, focused, managing the flow of information. Cole was in a different moment. He was somewhere between who he had been at the beginning of this night and who he was going to be after it ended. Walker could feel that transition happening beside him, the way you can feel a weather change before you can see it. The air shifts, the pressure changes, something is coming that you knew was coming, but that is different when it arrives. The radio cracked. Bennett's voice. Scouts are at 400 meters. Main element is... I have the commander in my scope. The briefest pause. The pause of a settled heartbeat. Firing. The crack from the tower hit the night, and then the desert answered with chaos. Not immediately. There was a gap of maybe 2 seconds between the shot and the visible result, 2 seconds in which the operations position held its collective breath, and the world seemed to narrow down to the sound of the Barrett's echo rolling across the valley floor. Then the radio came alive, not with Bennett, with the sounds of the enemy unit fragmenting. They could hear it without optics, the change in movement sound, the difference between a coordinated advance and the sudden broken pattern of a unit that has lost its command voice. A unit that was moving with purpose 60 seconds ago and is now moving with confusion. The main element had been 30 seconds from being fully committed to open ground, and now their commander was gone, and the voice that was supposed to be telling them what to do next was silent. Scouts have stopped, Bennett reported. They're looking back toward the canyon. They can't see the commander. They're not sure what happened. They're hesitating. A pause. Main element is slowing. Front elements are looking back. Walker spoke into his radio, his voice controlled and deliberate, the voice he used when control was the most important thing he had to offer. All elements, Sierra Actual. The enemy main element is in the open and disorganized. Stand by for instructions. Cole was beside him. Now we move. Not yet, Walker said. He keyed the radio for Bennett. Echo 7, secondary leadership. Who takes command when the primary goes down? Already looking, Bennett said. And then in under 10 seconds, I have a figure moving to the front of the main element from the rear third. He's got a radio and he's using it. New command element is trying to establish control. Can you already engaged? Another crack from the tower. Another roll of displaced sound across the valley floor. Secondary is down, Bennett said. In the canyon, the main element had now lost 2 command figures in under 60 seconds on open ground from a source they couldn't locate. The incoming rounds had produced no visible muzzle flash from the tower in the darkness. The sound was confusing at that distance, and the pattern was impossible to predict. Because there was no observable pattern, there was only a precision that looked from the receiving end like something supernatural. What happened next was something Walker had seen exactly once before in his career, and it was the thing that changed every assessment he had ever made about what constituted a decisive moment in a firefight. The enemy main element, 60-plus personnel trained and prepared and committed to an operation they had planned, meticulously stopped. Not a retreat, not a rout, just a stop. A frozen collective moment of a unit that has experienced something its training did not prepare it for. They did not know where the fire was coming from. They did not know how many shooters were targeting them. They did not know if their position was already bracketed. They had no commander to tell them what to do next. And in that frozen moment, that 7 to 10 second window of collective indecision, Bennett did the most important thing she had done all night. She did not fire. She let them stand there. She let them feel the weight of the space around them, in the silence of their own radios, in the absence of voices telling them what to do next. She let them feel every second of that weight, and she did not take it away with a shot, because a shot would have resolved the moment. A shot would have given them something to react to. The silence, the deliberate, controlled, purposeful silence was worse. The silence said, "We can see you, we choose when." At the operations position, Torres came over the radio from the northern perimeter. Sierra Actual northern perimeter. Enemy northern element has ceased fire. They're looking south. They don't know what's happening. Walker nodded to himself. The northern element had been operating on coordination from the relay, which was gone, and on confidence from the main element's advance, which had just collapsed. Without either of those things, the northern element was a support element with nothing to support. Torres, hold position, Walker said. Don't let them see movement. Yes, sir, Cole said. Probably, Walker said. And the main element? Walker keyed the radio. Echo 7 read me the main element. Bennett's response was 3 words that shifted the temperature of the night one final time. They're turning around. Cole heard it. He put both hands on the map table and leaned forward and stared at the canyon mouth position as though he could see it through the dark and distance by wanting to badly enough. The main element, 60-plus personnel staged in that canyon since before Walker's unit had inserted Tonight Patient and prepared and positioned for exactly this kind of operation, was turning around. walking back into the canyon that they had come out of, giving back the ground they had held. Retreating not because they had been overwhelmed by superior force, not because they had taken casualties they couldn't sustain, not because a larger unit had flanked them. Because one person in a tower had made them uncertain. And uncertainty in an ambush is fatal. Cole straightened up from the map. He turned and looked directly at the tower. He looked at it for a long time, and Walker watched him look at it, and neither of them said anything. And the silence between them was a completely different silence from any silence they had shared before tonight. Torres's voice came over the radio, and this time it had lost most of its tension and had taken on the particular tone of someone reporting something they are still processing. Sierra Actual, Northern Element is withdrawing. I say again, Northern Element is pulling back from contact. I've got eyes on at least 8 personnel moving north. They're taking their equipment. Walker keyed the radio. Confirm Torres. Hold position. Let them go. Certainly, Torres sounded uncertain, like he'd expected a different order. Let them go, Torres. They're done. Sierra Actual out. He put the radio down. Around him, the operations position slowly began to breathe again. Delgado let out a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob, but occupied the territory between them. Martinez said something under his breath to the soldier beside him. The QRF element still at the southern perimeter came over the radio, asking for an update, and Walker told them to hold, and they said understood, in the voice of people who had been in the dark a long time and were only now beginning to believe the dark might end. Bennett's voice came over the radio one more time. Main element is back in the canyon. Northern element is withdrawing. I'm tracking no additional contact elements. Your perimeter is clear. Walker picked up the handset. He held it for a moment before he pressed transmit, and in that moment he thought about an hour ago. The explosion that started everything. The fragmented communications Jackson on the eastern ridge with shrapnel in him. Cole's voice saying, send us a real warrior and a single vehicle, arriving with one person in it, who looked at the battlefield and saw a completely different war from the one everyone else was fighting. Echo 7, Walker said. Outstanding work. A pause. Then, thank you, sir. Request permission to maintain overwatch for the next 40 minutes while you organize extraction. Walker almost said you don't need to ask. He almost said you have earned the right to do whatever you judge necessary. Instead, he said the thing that was actually appropriate, that acknowledged the work without making it small by over-celebrating it. Permission granted, Sergeant. We'll start the extraction sequence on your signal. Understood. Echo 7 out. Walker put the radio down. He looked at Cole. Cole was looking at the map. He had his hands flat on the table, both of them, like he needed the solid surface under him. He was looking at the canyon position on the map, in the relay position, and the northern perimeter route, and he was tracing the entire night's pattern with his eyes, all of it, every piece, and Walker could see in Cole's face the experience of understanding something all at once that you had been not understanding piece by piece for hours. Cole said quietly without looking up, I was never going to see the relay. Walker didn't answer immediately. I was looking for a fight, Cole said. I was looking for the thing to hit. I was looking for the enemy the way I always look for the enemy, as a target, as a force to match. I wasn't looking for the pattern. He finally looked up. She looked for the pattern. Yes, Walker said. The whole night, she never went after the enemy. She went after the structure that was holding the enemy together. She took away their information. She took away their coordination. She took away their command voice. She turned a unit into a group of people who didn't know what to do. A pause. She didn't fight the battle. She dissolved it. Yes, Walker said again. Cole pushed back from the map table. He straightened. He looked at the tower, that particular dark shape against the dark sky. Unremarkable, except for the rifle that had changed everything tonight. I said something at the beginning of this that I'm going to have to spend a while thinking about, Cole said. Ryan, I'm not looking for absolution, Walker. I'm naming it. He looked at his hands. I said it in front of the men. They heard it. She heard it. And then she went up there and spent 6 hours holding this unit together from the inside out. And she never once made me feel it, never once used it, never once came back at me with it. He paused. That's a kind of strength I don't think I have. Walker looked at him. He let the moment be what it was. You might, Walker said finally. You don't know yet. Cole looked at him. Recognizing it, Walker said, is the first part. The radio clicked once from the tower. Bennett's prearranged signal for all clear. The perimeter was secure. The night was for the first time in hours genuinely quiet. Walker keyed his radio for all elements. All stations Sierra Actual. Begin consolidation. Start the extraction sequence. Medical element, I want Jackson prepped for movement in 30 minutes. Everybody else I want accountability reports in 20. Sierra Actual out. The operations position came alive around him. The organized, purposeful activity of soldiers who have been through something hard and come out the other side and now have jobs to do that have nothing to do with surviving and everything to do with moving forward. Delgado was already at his radio, running full communications checks on every channel that had been degraded for the past hours. His voice carrying the particular energy of someone doing the work they're meant to do at the exact moment they're meant to do it. Martinez was organizing the QRF element for a sweep of the perimeter before extraction. Torres checked in from the North Unit intact, all personnel accounted for, ready to move on Walker's order. The machine was working again. Cole picked up his rifle. He checked it, habit automatic, the muscle memory of years. He looked toward the tower. I'm going to the tower, he said. Walker looked at him. She'll come down when she's ready. I know, Cole said. I'll wait at the base. Walker watched him go. He watched the major walk through the operations position and out the far side toward the base of the tower, and he thought about all the ways a person can be strong and how few of them have anything to do with how loud you are or how far you can be heard or how certain you sound when you say things in the dark. The desert was quiet. Above it, in the tower, Bennett held her scope on the canyon mouth and the east ridge and the northern approaches. And she watched, and she waited, and she was what she had always been, the thing nobody saw until the moment everything depended on it. 40 minutes. She had said 40 minutes of Overwatch. She would give them 40 minutes. Not 39, not 41, 40. Because that was the job, and the job was what mattered and everything else. Cole at the base of the tower, Walker at the operations map, the soldiers moving through the dark, consolidating and preparing. All of it was what happened when the job got done right. The canyon below her was still. The desert held everything it was holding. And Sergeant Claire Bennett, Echo 7, watched it all with the patient, absolute attention of someone who had never needed to be the loudest person in the room to be the most important one in it. Cole reached the base of the tower at 22:47 hours. I knew the exact time because he checked his watch when he got there, the way soldiers do when they need something concrete to hold on to a number. A fact, something that doesn't shift under pressure. 22:47. He stood at the base of the ladder and looked up into the dark, and he could see the faint silhouette of Bennett at the top, prone behind the Barrett, still watching, still working, as completely absorbed in the job as she had been when she first climbed up 4 hours ago. I didn't call up to her. He sat down on the ground with his back against the tower's base and his rifle across his knees, and he waited. It was the first time all night that Ryan Cole had nothing to do. No decision to push, for no order to give, no position to argue, no forward movement to advocate. Just the desert in the dark and the distant sound of his unit consolidating behind him and the woman above him doing the last 40 minutes of a job that had already changed everything. He sat with that. It was uncomfortable. Cole was a man who had built his entire professional identity around motion, around the idea that forward was always better than still, that action was always better than waiting, that the warrior who pressed the hardest was the warrior who won. Sitting at the base of this tower in the quiet aftermath of a battle that had been won by someone who barely moved, who had used stillness as a weapon, who had controlled an entire enemy unit through patience and precision, sitting with that required something from Cole that he wasn't sure he had practiced enough to do easily. But he sat with it anyway. Above him, Bennett was on her final sweep of the perimeter sectors. East Ridge clear. Canyon mouth closed up tight, the enemy main element back behind the terrain. Feature where they had started the night with entirely different expectations. Northern approach open and empty, where Torres's perimeter had been getting hit for hours. She tracked each sector methodically, not because she expected to find new contact, but because 40 minutes meant 40 minutes and the job did not end until the job ended. At 2:51, something came through her earpiece that made her go still in a different way than the stillness of watching. Her own radio. A frequency she hadn't heard active tonight. A frequency that was not part of the tactical network she'd been running with Walker's unit. It was a monitoring channel, a background channel she kept it open on a secondary receiver, a habit she'd developed years ago when a critical piece of information had once come through a channel nobody was watching. She almost didn't trust what she heard. She keyed her primary radio, Sierra Actual Echo 7. I need you to confirm something with command for me. Walker's voice came back immediately. Go ahead, Sergeant. Ask command if they have any assets moving in the Eastern Canyon. Any element, any purpose, any authorization level. I need confirmation in the next 60 seconds. A pause that was slightly longer than Walker's pauses usually were. Say again, Echo 7, you're asking about assets in the canyon. The enemy-held canyon. I'm asking, Bennett said, because I'm picking up a transmission on a secondary channel that should not be active tonight. And the transmission pattern is not consistent with the enemy element I've been tracking. Walker was already talking to Delgado before Bennett finished the sentence. Cole, sitting at the base of the tower below, heard the shift in radio traffic from where he was, the sudden acceleration of voice traffic at the operations position, the particular energy of something unexpected entering the picture. He got to his feet. Delgado worked fast. He had command on the primary channel in under 40 seconds, pushed the query through in 20 more. And the answer that came back did something unusual to the young sergeant's face. It stripped away the exhaustion and the relief that had been settling in over the last hour, and replaced it with something fresh and sharp and alarmed. He looked at Walker. Sir, Delgado said, command says no authorized assets in or near the Eastern Canyon, nothing sanctioned, nothing scheduled, nothing en route. Walker stared at him for 1 second. Then he was on the radio. Echo 7 command confirms no authorized assets in the Eastern Canyon. What are you seeing? Bennett's response was measured but carried an edge that her voice had not carried at any point during the previous 4 hours. Not during the engagement, not during the shots, not during any of the high-pressure decision points of the night. I'm not seeing it yet, she said. I'm hearing it. The transmission pattern on the secondary channel, it's not enemy unit communication. The encryption structure is different. The burst timing is different. Someone is in that canyon who is not part of the enemy element we've been engaging, and they are transmitting on a frequency that requires a level of equipment the training adversary unit wouldn't have access to. The operations position went very quiet. Cole had come back in. He stood at the edge of the sandbag wall, and he was listening, and his face had the expression of someone doing rapid calculation under pressure. Walker spoke slowly, processing out loud. If there's a third party in the canyon, then tonight was not what we thought it was, Bennett said. That sentence landed at the operations position like the first shot of the night. Clean, precise, and immediately disorienting. Not what we thought it was. Walker turned to his map. He stared at it. He stared at the canyon, the relay position, the northern perimeter, the entire layout of the night's events, and he felt the warning hum that had been with him since the beginning of this operation return, with a resonance that was different from anything he'd felt before. Cole came to stand beside him. A third party doesn't make sense, he said, but he said it the way you say something when you're hoping the act of saying it will prove it true, and Walker could hear that hope working against the evidence. The interference on our communications, Walker said slowly. Echo 7 identified it as the enemy relay using our frequency band. But what if it wasn't just the relay, Bennett said over the radio, and Walker realized she had heard him because his radio was still transmitting. What if the relay was one layer? What if someone else was using our comms degradation as cover for their own activity? Delgado's pen stopped moving entirely. He was frozen over his equipment, staring at Walker. Echo 7, Walker said. What's your read? A pause, a real one. This time not the calculating pause of working through a known problem, but the pause of someone encountering the edge of what they can see from where they're standing. I don't have enough information, Bennett said, and the honesty of it was striking in its simplicity. I know there's a transmission I can't account for. I know it's coming from inside the canyon. I know it's on a frequency that requires equipment the training adversary unit shouldn't have. Beyond that, I'm working with what I can hear, not what I can see. Can you get eyes on the source? Walker asked. Not from here. The canyon interior is below my sight line at this angle. I'd need to reposition. Do it, Walker said immediately. If I reposition, I lose overwatch of your extraction route for approximately 12 to 15 minutes. Walker looked at Cole. Cole looked at Walker. The question between them was the same question, and neither of them had a clean answer to it. It was Delgado who spoke up quietly with the careful voice of someone who isn't sure if they have standing to offer what they're about to offer. Sir, if there's something in that canyon that we don't understand and we extract, without knowing what it is, we might be extracting through something we can't see. Walker looked at him. Delgado held his ground. I'm just saying, sir, unknown contact inside the perimeter is a different problem than defeated contact outside it. Walker turned back through the radio. Echo 7, what do you need to reposition safely? 7 minutes, Bennett said, and I need Cole's element to provide eyes on the extraction route while I'm dark. Cole heard his name. He picked up his own radio without being asked. Echo 7, this is Cole. I've got the extraction route. Where do you need my eyes? A brief pause. Northern corridor 200 meters out, Bennett said. You're looking for movement from the northeast. If anyone tries to use the Overwatch gap, they come from there. Understood, Cole said. He was already moving, calling Martinez with one hand and keying his radio with the other. His voice falling into the clear, clipped cadence of a man, back in his element, moving, directing, making things happen. The directional competence that had defined Cole's career was not wrong. It had just been applied to the wrong problem all night. Now the problem was the right shape for Cole's tools, and he moved into it with the ease of someone putting on something that fits. Walker watched him go. Then he looked at the tower where Bennett was already moving, repositioning with the rifle in the case, and the particular silent efficiency of someone doing something for the 10,000th time in conditions they've been preparing for their whole life. The 12-minute gap began. Those 12 minutes at the operations position were among the longest of the night, and the night had already contained some very long minutes. Walker stood at his map and managed his elements and kept the extraction sequence moving with one part of his attention, while the other part stayed fixed on the question Bennett had put into the air and left there tonight was not what we thought it was. He ran-eyed back, the sequence of the evening, the initial explosion that had been perfectly placed to eliminate his observation advantage, the communications degradation that had been comprehensive and immediate, the timing of the northern attack, the precision of the canyon staging. He ran it all back and he looked at it with fresh eyes, and he thought about what level of planning and intelligence it would take to execute a training adversary operation to this level of sophistication. And then he thought about who would benefit from a special operations unit being blind and trapped and unable to communicate for an extended period in a classified field exercise. And that thought opened up into something much larger and much colder than anything he had been dealing with tonight. At 2304, Bennett's voice came back on the radio. She was repositioned, and her voice had something in it that Walker had not heard from her. All night, a tightness controlled but present, the sound of someone who has found the thing they were looking for and wishes they hadn't. Sierra Actual, I have eyes on the canyon interior. Report, Walker said. There is a secondary position approximately 400 meters inside the canyon mouth, separate from the training adversary element. I count 2 personnel, 1 vehicle, civilian pattern, not military issue, and I have clear visual on communications equipment that is not consistent with training exercise gear. A pause. This equipment is transmitting actively right now. The operations position went so quiet that Walker could hear Delgado breathing. What are they transmitting? Walker asked. I cannot intercept the content, Bennett said. But the transmission pattern, the frequency, the burst structure, the encryption signature. This equipment is designed for long-range data transmission. High volume. They're not coordinating a tactical operation. They're sending data out of this area. Walker gripped the map table. What kind of data? He said, not quite a question. The kind, Bennett said carefully, that you send when you have been watching a classified special operations field exercise for 6 hours and you want someone outside the perimeter to know exactly what you saw. The silence that followed was the silence of a room full of soldiers, realizing at the same moment that the night they had just survived was not the complete picture. The training exercise, the classified operation, the enemy unit that had been too sophisticated, too precisely calibrated with intelligence about Walker's team that should not have been available to a training adversary. Torres's voice came over the radio from the northern perimeter, tight and confused. Sierra Actual Torres, I'm picking up a vehicle signature moving away from the canyon from the north side. Moving fast. Are we tracking that? Walker hit his radio immediately. Echo 7, did you catch that? I caught it, Bennett said. The two personnel at the secondary position are gone. The vehicle is moving north-northeast. They made us. They know I found their position. Cole's voice cut in from the extraction route. Walker, I have a fast-moving vehicle in my sector 150 meters northeast, no lights, moving toward the northern corridor. Walker made the decision in under 2 seconds. Echo 7, I need that vehicle stopped. Range and angle are difficult from current position, Bennett said. I can attempt a mobility kill on the vehicle engine block, but I cannot guarantee personnel safety at this speed and distance. Mobility kill only, Walker said. Stop the vehicle. Do not engage personnel. Understood. Stand by. Cole's voice. Vehicle is still moving, Walker. It's fast. It's going to hit the northern corridor in under a minute. Torres, I don't have a blocking position, sir. They're going to be past me before I can move. Martinez from the southern element. Sir, do you want me to hold Martinez? Walker said. Everyone hold. Echo 7 has the vehicle. The operations position held its breath. 1 second, 2, 3, 4. The crack from Bennett's new position was different from the tower shots, sharper, shorter, the sound bouncing differently off the canyon walls. And then Cole's voice, the most controlled Walker had heard him sound all night, carrying the flat, precise tone of someone reporting exactly what he's seeing without interpretation. Vehicle has stopped. Mobility kill confirmed. Vehicle is stationary approximately 110 meters northeast of my position. I can see 2 occupants. They are not armed, they are holding up, hands visible. Walker was already on the command channel. Command Sierra Actual, priority traffic, I need immediate support element at my location. We have 2 civilian personnel in custody, unknown affiliation, observed, transmitting on non-exercise frequencies from inside the classified exercise perimeter. I need intelligence assets, and I need them now. Command came back in 15 seconds. The voice was senior. It was very serious. Sierra Actual confirmed civilian personnel inside the exercise perimeter. Confirmed, Walker said. 2 individuals, 1 vehicle, active long-range transmission equipment. They were operational inside the canyon for an unknown duration. We believe they were monitoring classified exercise operations. A longer pause from command. Sierra Actual, do not let those personnel move. Support element is 30 minutes out. Lock it down. Lockdown command, Sierra Actual out. Walker put the radio down. He stood in the operations position with the map in front of him and the full weight of the night settling around him, and he understood now, completely finally, what the warning hum had been trying to tell him since the first explosion. The training exercise had been real. The threat had been real, but the threat had not been the training adversary. The training adversary had been a vector, a sophisticated, well-funded, expertly executed distraction designed to do exactly what it had done for hours. Isolate Walker's unit, degrade their communications, fix them in place, keep them focused on the fight in front of them, while something else happened in the canyon behind the fight. Someone had been watching, someone had been collecting. And without Bennett's secondary monitoring channel, without the 47-year-old habit of a precision specialist who left one ear on a channel, nobody else was listening to, they would have been gone before the extraction sequence even began. Delgado said very quietly, "Sir, if Echo 7 hadn't—" "I know," Walker said. "They would have been gone and we would have never—" "I know, Sergeant." Delgado stopped talking. He turned back to his equipment and he started logging because there was a lot to log, and logging was what he did when he needed to do something with his hands. Cole came back into the operations position at 23-8. He had zip-tied the 2 detainees to their vehicle with Martinez supervising and had left 2 soldiers on them while he came back to report. He came in straight and direct the way Cole always moved, but there was something around his eyes that wasn't quite what it usually was. Not doubt. Cole's doubt had resolved itself tonight into something more useful than doubt. This was more like the look of a man who has had his entire map of a territory suddenly revised and is still calibrating the new version. He stood in front of Walker. 2 civilians, he said. 1 male, 1 female. No weapons, no military identification. They have credentials, but they're poorly backstopped, the kind of thing that passes a surface check and falls apart if you look for 2 minutes. He paused. They're not talking. They don't need to talk tonight, Walker said. Intel assets will handle it. Cole nodded. He looked at the map. He looked at the position of the training adversary unit now back in the canyon and the position of the secondary element they had found and the relay team that Bennett had taken out on the East Ridge, and he traced the whole architecture of the night with his eyes. This was a surveillance operation, Cole said. Yes. Wrapped inside a training exercise. Yes. Which means someone knew we would be here, knew the parameters of the exercise, knew enough to position a collection team inside the exercise perimeter without triggering any of our pre-mission security checks. He looked at Walker. That's not an outside operation. That's someone with access. Walker held his look. That's a conversation for the intelligence people, not for tonight. Cole held the look for another moment, then let it go. He was right, and Walker was right, and both of them knew that the conversation they were not having was going to be had by other people in a much larger room. Their job tonight was to hold the perimeter, protect their people, and make sure the 2 detainees in the northern quarter were still there when the support element arrived. Bennett, Cole said, it wasn't a question. It was just her name said in the way you say someone's name when you're trying to understand something about them. She's still in position, Walker said. She'll maintain overwatch until the support element arrives. Cole looked at the tower at the new position Bennett had moved to lower on the ridge with eyes on both the canyon and the northern corridor. He looked at it for a long moment. The secondary channel, he said. Yes, she monitors a secondary channel in the field. Apparently, standard protocol doesn't require that. No, Walker said, it doesn't. Cole was quiet. She does it anyway. Yes, because she understands that what's required and what's necessary are not always the same thing. Cole said it without drama, without emphasis, just the plain statement of a man who has arrived at a conclusion through a route he didn't expect to travel. That's not training, that's judgment. Yes, Walker said. Cole rubbed the back of his neck with one hand. That same gesture Walker had seen earlier, Cole's version of visible discomfort. But this time it was different. Earlier, it had been the discomfort of being wrong. Now it was the discomfort of integration, of taking something new and difficult and true, and making room for it inside a worldview that hadn't had room for it before. I have been in the Army for 15 years, Cole said. I have run training programs. I have evaluated personnel. I have written performance assessments. He stopped. He looked at the map. I would not have passed Echo 7. Walker was very still. I would have looked at her record, Cole said, and I would have found things to question. The solo operations profile, the unconventional methodology, the way she works outside standard frameworks. He paused. I would have found a dozen professional reasons that were actually one personal reason dressed up in professional language. The honesty of it, the clean, unadorned honesty, was something Walker had not expected from Cole. Not because Cole was dishonest. Cole was one of the most straightforwardly honest men Walker had ever met. But this kind of honesty required looking at yourself from the outside, and that was different from factual honesty, and it cost more. Walker said, "You're saying it now." Yes, Cole said. That's something, I guess. That's more than something, Walker said quietly. Cole looked at him. He was about to say something when Bennett's voice came over the radio, clean and precise, and pulling both of them back into the present with the efficiency she brought to everything. Sierra Actual Echo 7. Support element is early. I have vehicle lights on the northern approach. Looks like 2 vehicles moving in tactical formation. ETA to your position approximately 8 minutes. Walker grabbed his radio. Command Sierra Actual. Confirm support element inbound north approach. Confirm Sierra Actual. Echo team with intel assets plus medical upgrade. They're ahead of schedule. Runway extraction for casualty also inbound ETA 22 minutes to your LZ. Jackson. Walker had managed to hold Jackson somewhere in the middle, register of his consciousness all night aware, monitoring the medical sergeant's check-ins, but not letting the worry about one man's shrapnel wound compromise the decisions he needed to make for 12. Now he let himself feel the relief of it. Jackson was going home. Everyone was going home. He keyed the all stations channel. All elements Sierra Actual. Support element 8 minutes out. Medical extraction 22 minutes to the LZ. Begin final extraction prep. I want accountability reports in 5 minutes. Sierra Actual out. The operations position surged with the particular energy of people who have been running on stress and adrenaline for hours and can finally convert that energy into forward motion. Delgado was transmitting logs. Martinez was organizing the QRF element for movement. Torres from the north was reporting full accountability of the northern perimeter element and requesting instructions for moving the detainees. Walker handled it. He handled all of it methodically, completely, the way he had handled everything tonight, with the calm of a man who had been trained for exactly this kind of pressure and had trusted exactly the right people at exactly the right moment. At 2334, the support element arrived. They came in 2 vehicles and they moved with the crisp efficiency of personnel who had been briefed on the situation and understood the stakes. The intel assets, 2 civilians and a military intelligence officer, went immediately to Cole's northern position to process the detainees. The medical upgrade included a trauma nurse who went directly to Jackson's position on the eastern ridge. The military intelligence officer, a captain named Osei, who had the compact, contained energy of someone who had been awake for 36 hours and intended to be awake for 36 more, came to Walker first. He looked at the operations position. He looked at the map. He looked at the positions of everything: the relay, the canyon, the secondary element, site, the detainee position. "This was yours?" Osei asked. "Echo 7 ran the tactical picture," Walker said. "I ran the unit. Echo 7 is still in position, maintaining overwatch. She'll come down when the perimeter is confirmed secure." Osei looked at the map again. "The secondary channel intercept. That's what gave you the second element." "Yes. That is not in any field SOP I've ever read," Osei said. "Not critically. Factually." "No," Walker said. "It's not." Osei looked at him. "I'm going to need a complete debrief. Every contact, every transmission, every timeline. This," he indicated the map. "The whole picture of the night is significantly larger than a training exercise gone wrong." "I know," Walker said. "The secondary element, the collection activity, the level of access someone had to your exercise parameters to position them inside the perimeter." Osei stopped himself. He was doing what intelligence professionals do when they're in the field and the picture is bigger than what they're ready to process in the moment. He was filing it, containing it, saving it for the room where it could be fully handled. "We have a lot of work ahead." "Tonight or tomorrow?" Walker asked. "Tonight," Osei said. "Tonight we secure the scene, the detainees, and the transmission equipment. Tomorrow we start understanding what was sent and where it went." He paused. "And who made it possible?" Cole had rejoined them. He stood at the edge of the conversation, listening. Osei looked at him. "Major Cole, you were first officer on scene with the detainees." "Yes," Cole said. "Anything they said before they stopped talking?" Cole thought about it for a moment. "One thing," he said, "the male detainee, before he understood the situation fully when we first got to them. He looked at my rank and he said." Cole paused. He looked like he was making sure he had the words exactly right. "He said we were told there would only be soldiers here tonight." Osei was very still. "He said that?" "Yes." "We were told there would only be soldiers here." "Yes." Osei looked at Walker. Walker looked at Osei, the same understanding moving between them like a current. They had expected Walker's unit. They had expected Cole's profile, Walker's approach, the predictable pattern of a conventional special operations unit, responding to threat in the way conventional special operations units respond to threat. They had not expected Echo 7. They had not planned for the secondary channel. They had not planned for the 40-minute overwatch that had no SOP basis. They had not planned for a precision specialist who monitored frequencies nobody told her to monitor, because judgment told her to, not doctrine. Osei said very quietly to no one in particular, "Someone told them what to expect." The implication sat in the air. Then Bennett's voice came over the radio for the final time that night, clear and uncomplicated and entirely focused on the present. "Sierra Actual, perimeter is confirmed secure. Support element has positive control of all sectors. I'm coming down." Walker keyed his radio. "Copy Echo 7. Come on down." He looked at Cole. Cole looked at the tower. Below it, at the base of the ladder, there was the same spot where Cole had been sitting 30 minutes ago, where he had sat with his back against the metal and waited, where he had done the uncomfortable work of sitting still. The ladder began to move. The sound of boots on metal rungs, steady and unhurried, coming down from somewhere high. The operations position, what was left of it, the soldiers still there. Delgado and Martinez and 2 others went quiet. Not deliberately. Just the natural quiet of people who know something is completing itself and want to be present for it. Cole took 3 steps toward the base of the tower. He stopped. He stood there, and he waited. Not because Walker told him to, not because protocol required it, not because there was anything tactical about the moment. He waited because it was the right thing to do. And standing there in the dark, in the Mojave Desert, at 23:41 hours, with the support element on the perimeter and Jackson on his way to medical care, and 2 detainees in custody, in a classified exercise that had turned out to be something much larger than anyone planned. Ryan Cole, Major, United States Army, 15 years of service and 2 combat tours, and a chest full of earned citations, stood at the base of a tower and waited for a 28-year-old sergeant to climb down. Because she had earned every second of the wait, and he had earned every second of giving it. The boots hit the ground. Bennett stepped back from the ladder. She had her rifle slung, her case in one hand, and the particular settled quality of someone who has finished exactly what they came to do. She looked at Cole. He looked at her. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Cole did something that Walker, watching from 30 feet away, would remember for the rest of his career. He put out his right hand, not a salute, not a formal acknowledgement, not a gesture that had a regulation behind it. Just a hand extended the way one person extends a hand to another person when they want to say something that words aren't quite big enough for. Bennett looked at it. She shifted her equipment case to her left hand. She took his hand. She shook it once firmly, the way you shake a hand when you mean it, and you don't need to mean it twice. And that was all. The handshake lasted 1 second, maybe 2. But Walker, standing 30 feet away watching it happen, understood that what passed between Cole's hand and Bennett's hand in those 1 or 2 seconds was not measured in time. It was measured in everything that had to happen before it could happen. The explosion at 1800 hours. The fragmented comms, Jackson bleeding on the eastern ridge. Cole's voice saying, "Send us a real warrior," into a radio with absolute certainty. The single vehicle arriving from the south. The woman who stepped out of it and looked at the battlefield like she was reading a page she had already read before. The tower, the shots, the secondary channel, the detainees in the northern corridor. All of it, every minute of it, compressed into the space between 2 palms. Then Bennett picked up her case and walked toward the operations position without ceremony, and Cole stood where he was for a moment, and then he followed her, and the desert absorbed the moment, the way it absorbed everything completely, without comment. Walker met her at the edge of the operations position. He didn't have a speech prepared. Walker was not a man who prepared speeches. He said what was true. "You saved this unit tonight." Bennett set her case down. She looked at him directly, the way she looked at everything, without deflection, without false modesty, without the performance of humility that is sometimes more about the audience than about the truth. "The unit held," she said. "That's what made it possible." Walker accepted that it was accurate. A unit that panicked, that broke position, that followed Cole's first instinct east into the canyon, that unit could not have been saved by anyone. The fact that Walker had held them, that Torres had obeyed an order to stop shooting, that made no immediate sense, that Delgado had kept working the radio through static and stress, all of that was real. Bennett knew it and named it. "Still," Walker said. "Still," she agreed. It was the whole conversation. It was enough. Delgado appeared at Walker's elbow with the look of a man who has been wanting to say something for 45 minutes and has finally run out of reasons to wait. He looked at Bennett. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He tried again. "Sergeant Bennett," he said, "the ceasefire call, when you told us to stop returning fire and make the enemy uncertain about what we were doing." He paused. "I have never seen anything like that. I have been in the Army for 4 years, and I have never seen anyone use silence as a tactical weapon." Bennett looked at him. Something in her expression softened very slightly. Not warmth exactly, or not only warmth, but something that recognized genuine curiosity and met it seriously. "Silence is only a weapon when the enemy needs noise to know they're winning," she said. "They were using your return fire as confirmation that the pressure was working. The moment you took that away, they were operating on assumption instead of information. Assumption makes people hesitate. Hesitation is a gap. Gaps are how you win." Delgado stared at her. He was going to be thinking about that for a long time. Walker could see it on his face, the particular expression of a young soldier having his understanding of something fundamental rearranged. "Write that down," Walker told him. Delgado was already reaching for the pen he'd destroyed earlier. He looked at its chewed and ruined state with brief despair, then grabbed a different one from his kit. 8-23-5E8. Captain Osei came back from the northern quarter with a face that had moved from professionally contained to something more urgently focused. He came directly to Walker. He came directly enough that Cole, who had been standing nearby reviewing accountability reports, looked up and read the body language and moved closer without being asked. The detainees, Osei said, the male subject. He's been formally advised of his situation and he's chosen to talk. Walker went still. What did he say? Osei took a breath. He says they were contracted, not by a foreign government, by a private entity. He says they've been monitoring U.S. Special Operations training exercises for 8 months, 6 different locations, 6 different units. The number sat in the air. 6 units, 6 months. He says tonight was different from the others, Osei continued. He says every other exercise followed a predictable response pattern. The units they were monitoring consistently responded to contact in ways the entity they work for could model and forecast. Tonight, the pattern broke. Walker looked at Bennett. Osei looked at Bennett. Cole looked at Bennett. She was standing at the edge of the group, her case at her feet, her rifle still slung, and she was listening with the same expression she had for everything attentive, present, processing. The male subject says the pattern broke, Osei said carefully, at approximately 2200 hours, when in his words, someone began taking apart their infrastructure from a position they could not identify. He says, and I'm quoting here, they told us the unit would fight back conventionally. They told us precision overwatch at this range in these conditions was not in the deployment profile for this exercise. Cole made a sound. It was a short sound, low involuntary. The sound of a man who has been running a tab in his head all night and just heard the final number. Walker looked at Cole. Cole was looking at the ground. They were briefed, Cole said, not a question, a statement, flat and cold and hard. Someone told them our deployment profile. Someone told them who to expect. Someone told them what Echo 7's presence in this exercise meant, and they decided it was a low enough risk to proceed. Yes, Osei said, because Echo 7 was not supposed to be here, Walker said slowly. She was sent because Sergeant Harrison from the original support package broke his ankle in pre-deployment training 3 days ago. She was the last-minute replacement. The silence that followed was the silence of a room full of people understanding something simultaneously. Bennett had not been planned. She had not been on any briefing document that existed more than 72 hours ago. Whoever had fed the surveillance team, the deployment profile had fed them information that was 72 hours out of date. The last-minute substitution, the thing that Cole had resented, the thing that had arrived when Cole asked for a real warrior, and produced something that didn't match his expectation. That substitution had been invisible to the people trying to make tonight go a certain way. One broken ankle, one late-night substitution. The entire operation had pivoted on that. Torres came over the radio from the northern perimeter, his voice careful. Sierra Actual, the intel team is asking if Echo 7 can come to the northern position for a debrief on the transmission intercept. They want the exact frequency and the specific characteristics she identified. Walker looked at Bennett. She nodded once and picked up her case. She walked north. Osei went with her, and Walker watched them go. And then he turned to find Cole right behind him, closer than he'd realized. Cole said someone in our structure fed them the profile. Yes. That investigation goes somewhere very uncomfortable. Yes, Walker said. It does. Cole looked north in the direction Bennett had gone. She needs to know what she walked into tonight. Not just the tactical picture, the full picture. Osei will brief her. She should hear it from us first, Cole said. And he said it with a directness that had nothing of the old Cole in it. Nothing of the man who had sat in operations positions and made quick, clean decisions and never looked back. This was directness with depth behind it. Directness that understood weight. She came into this as a last-minute replacement. She probably doesn't know she was the variable that broke the whole operation. She should hear that. Walker looked at him for a long moment. Okay, Walker said, let's go. They walked north together. The accountability of the moment. 2 senior officers walking through a desert at midnight to make sure a 28-year-old sergeant understood the full significance of what she had done was not lost on Walker. He thought about the word warrior and what Cole had used it to mean at the beginning of the night and what it meant now, walking through the dark, side by side. And he thought the word had not changed, but his understanding of its shape had changed completely. They found Bennett at the northern position, seated on the side of the vehicle that the detainees were not on, with Osei across from her, and the transmission intercept documentation spread between them. She was going through it systematically, point by point, with the same methodical attention she brought to everything, and the intel team's people were watching her work with the expression of professionals recognizing other professionals. Walker came and sat beside her. Cole stood. "There's something you need to know," Walker said. Bennett looked at him. He told her. All of it. The deployment profile, the 6 other exercises, the 72-hour window, Sergeant Harrison's ankle, the substitution that nobody had thought would matter. She listened without interrupting. She listened the way she did everything completely. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Harrison broke his ankle on a training run." "Yes," Walker said, 3 days ago. "Yes." She looked at the transmission equipment laid out in front of her. She looked at the documentation in her hands. And then she did something small and human that Walker had not seen her do yet tonight. She exhaled one slow breath, and for just a second, her composure had something underneath it that was not tactical and not professional. It was the look of a person processing something that is too large to process all at once and choosing consciously to put most of it away for later. "Is Harrison okay?" she asked. Walker blinked. Cole, standing above them, made a small, involuntary movement. "Stable fracture," Walker said. "He's fine," she nodded. "Good." That was it. That was her response to learning that a piece of random misfortune, another soldier's injury, had dropped her into the middle of something that had been running for 8 months. Something that had now given intelligence services the thread they needed to pull on something much bigger. Her first question was whether Harrison was okay. Cole sat down. He sat down on the ground beside the vehicle, which was not a thing Cole did. Cole didn't sit on the ground. Cole stood, or Cole moved. But he sat down and he looked at Bennett, and he said something that Walker had not expected him to say tonight, or possibly ever. "I want to apologize," Cole said. Bennett looked at him. "For what I said at the beginning, when you arrived." He held her look without flinching, which was the only way Cole knew how to do anything. "I said it in front of your colleagues. I said it in front of soldiers who will remember it. I said it without any basis in your actual capabilities, and with complete basis in my own assumptions, which turned out to be wrong." He paused. "It was wrong of me to say it. I'm sorry." The intel team's people had gone very quiet. Osei was looking at Cole with an expression that was carefully neutral. Bennett held Cole's look for a moment. Then she said, "Major, you said what you believed. I understand that." "I believe something that wasn't true," Cole said. "Most people do," she said. "About a lot of things. The ones who change what they believe when the evidence changes, those are the ones worth apologizing to you." She paused, and something in her expression was very direct and very honest and slightly harder than her usual composure. "The apology means more than you might think. Not because I needed it, because of what it cost you to give it." Cole looked at her. He didn't say anything else. But something in his face completed itself. The long reckoning that had been running since the moment he first saw her step out of that vehicle, the uncomfortable migration from one understanding of the world to a better one, arrived at whatever its final address was going to be. It wasn't over. These things were never fully over in the span of one night. But it had arrived at something real, something that would hold. At 0047, the casualty extraction helicopter reached the LZ. Jackson came out on a litter conscious, giving Torres a hard time about the IV line, which was the surest sign possible that he was going to be fine. The trauma nurse had him stabilized and annotated and ready for transfer with the efficiency of someone who had done this hundreds of times and made it look like nothing. Walker watched Jackson load. He felt the last tight piece in his chest release. Everyone was accounted for. Everyone was going home. The debrief happened in stages across the following 3 hours at the operations position at the Northern Corridor, with the detainees, and finally in a mobile intelligence unit that Osei's team brought in shortly after 0100. Walker gave his timeline. Cole gave his. The other soldiers gave theirs in sequence, one after another, each account adding texture and detail to the picture that was assembling itself. Bennett gave hers last. She sat across from Osei and 2 other intelligence officers, and she walked them through the night in the same flat, methodical way she had walked through everything. Transmission characteristics, timing intervals, the specific signal pattern that had told her the secondary element was not part of the tactical exercise, the decision sequence that had led her to reposition the mobility kill on the vehicle. She gave them the exact frequency. She gave them the burst timing to the decimal. She gave them everything they needed to trace the transmission. And she gave it without embellishment, without drama. Without any indication that she understood, she was handing them the starting point for what was going to become a significant counterintelligence investigation. Osei at one point stopped writing. He looked at her across the table. He said, "Sergeant Bennett, the secondary channel, you maintain that as a personal protocol?" "Yes," she said, "not mandated by any SOP." "No." "When did you start doing it?" She thought about it. "My third solo deployment. There was an exercise in Nevada, different environment, similar mission profile. Something felt wrong in the second hour, but I couldn't identify it. I thought afterward that if I'd had one more ear open, I might have found it earlier." She paused. "I started doing it after that." Osei looked at his notes. He looked back at her. "In 8 months of this operation across 6 exercises, the surveillance team was never detected. 6 units, 6 opportunities to identify a third-party presence inside a classified exercise perimeter. Nobody found them." "I know," Bennett said. "You found them in 4 hours." "I found the signal," she said precisely. "The signal told me where to look." Osei nodded slowly. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "There's going to be a very serious conversation about how the deployment profile for this exercise was compromised. That investigation goes into places that are uncomfortable." "I understand," Bennett said. "You may be asked to testify about what you found and how you found it." "I understand," she said again, in exactly the same tone, unshaken, present, ready. Osei looked at her for another moment. Then he closed his notebook. "I'm going to put in a report, Sergeant, about tonight, about what you did and how you did it and what the outcome of it was." He paused. "I want you to know before I write it, in 20 years of intelligence work, I have encountered maybe 4 or 5 individuals whose fieldcraft exceeded their training parameters by a margin I found genuinely surprising." He let that sit for a second. "You're one of them." Bennett looked at him. "Thank you, sir. Not false modesty, not deflection, not the performance of someone who doesn't know their own value. Just thank you, sir. Clean, direct, appropriate, and done." She walked out of the mobile unit into the desert morning. The sky was beginning the very earliest suggestion of lightning, not dawn. Yet just the withdrawal of the deepest dark, the sky moving from black to something that might eventually become blue. Walker was waiting outside. She stopped when she saw him. He was leaning against the side of the unit with his arms crossed and the look of a man who has been deciding whether to say something for several minutes and has come down on the side of saying it. "The general is going to hear about tonight," Walker said. "I expect so," Bennett said. "Reynolds, he knows your work. He's going to want to talk to you about what comes next." Bennett held his look. "What comes next is I go back to my unit and I do my job." "Your job might change," Walker said. "My job," she said, "is whatever the mission requires, same as it's always been." Walker looked at her. He wanted to say something that was larger than the practical conversation they were having, something that named what the night had been and what she had done in it. He was a man who used words carefully and didn't reach for them when they weren't warranted, and he found himself reaching now. "You changed something tonight," he said. "Not just the tactical outcome, something in how the people who were here are going to think about this work, about what this work requires, about who is built for it." He paused. "That matters. That lasts longer than the after-action report." Bennett was quiet for a moment. "Captain Walker," she said, "the thing that changed tonight was not what you think it was." He looked at her. "I didn't change how your people think about precision work. I didn't prove anything about who belongs in what role." She held his look steadily. "What changed tonight is that 12 soldiers held their position when it was uncomfortable to hold it. They trusted a process they didn't fully understand. They stopped shooting when every instinct said to shoot. They stayed when everything in them said to move." She paused. "That's not my work. That's yours, and Cole's, and Torres's, and Delgado's, and Martinez's, and every single one of them." Another pause, shorter. "I was the tool. You were the ones who knew when to use it." Walker stared at her. She picked up her case. She looked at the sky, that early not quite dawn quality, the dark giving way to something, And then she looked back at him. Did everyone get water? She asked. The question hit him the same way it had hit Cole when Cole had first heard about it in the briefing. The complete unceremonious pivot from the largest picture to the smallest and most immediate human need. Walker almost laughed. He trolled it into a smile that was small and genuine. Everyone got water, he said. Good, she said. Then we're done. She walked toward the vehicle staging area. 3 weeks later, in a conference room at a military installation that does not appear on any publicly available map, General Marcus Reynolds read the after-action report for the Mojave exercise with the complete attention of a man who has learned over 40 years of military service to read documents the way some people read landscapes looking for what the terrain tells you that the map does not. He read it twice. Then he made 2 phone calls. The first was to the Counterintelligence Division regarding the ongoing investigation into the compromised deployment profiles in the private entity that had funded 8 months of unauthorized surveillance of U.S. Special Operations training. That investigation had expanded significantly in the 3 weeks since the Mojave exercise. The thread that Bennett had pulled on the secondary channel had unraveled into something that reached into places the initial assessment had not predicted. The 2 detainees had cooperated. Names had been named. The uncomfortable conversation that Walker and Cole had anticipated was happening in rooms much larger than either of them had imagined. The second call Reynolds made was to Walker. Walker was at his home station. He was writing the final version of his after-action report, the one that would go into the permanent record. And he was being careful with every word because he understood that the words mattered and that the people they described deserved to be described accurately. Reynolds' call came in at 1600 hours. Walker, the general said. Sir, Walker said, I read your report. Yes, sir. The final line, Reynolds said. Read it to me. Walker looked at his screen. He had written the final line that morning in the particular early morning clarity that comes after several days of thinking about something. He had written it 3 times before he got it right. He read it. On that day, we did not receive reinforcements. We received someone who understood the battlefield better than the battlefield understood itself. Reynolds was quiet for a moment. That's accurate, Reynolds said. Yes, sir, I believe it is. I want to talk to you about Sergeant Bennett's future development, Reynolds said. I have some thoughts about how her capabilities can be applied at a level where the impact is broader than a single exercise. Walker chose his next words carefully. He chose them because they were true and because Bennett had earned them, and because sometimes the right thing to say on behalf of someone is the thing they would never say on behalf of themselves. Sir, Walker said, with respect, before we talk about how to use Echo 7's capabilities, I think we should talk about how the military builds more of them. Reynolds went quiet. Not more people like her in a narrow sense, Walker said. More people who think the way she thinks, who see the battlefield the way she sees it, who understand that controlling a situation is not the same as overpowering it, who know the difference between winning a fight and winning the night. He paused. We have systems for developing people who are fast and strong and aggressive. We are very good at that. We are less good at developing people who are patient and precise and willing to see what's actually there instead of what they expected to find. A long pause. That, Reynolds said, is a training problem. Yes, sir, it is. Another pause. And Echo 7, Reynolds said, is the solution. 4 months after the Mojave exercise, Sergeant Claire Bennett, Echo 7 stood in front of a classroom of 32 soldiers at a training facility in the southwestern United States. The room was full of people who had been selected because they were the best in their respective specialties, the kind of soldiers who had succeeded at everything the military had asked them to do so far, and who carried, many of them, the particular confidence of people who have not yet encountered the limit of what they know. They were about to encounter it. Bennett stood at the front of the room with no notes and no visual aids, and the same quality she had brought to every situation in her career. The complete settled presence of someone who is exactly where they are supposed to be, doing exactly what they are supposed to be doing. She looked at the room. The room looked at her. In the back row, Walker sat in a chair and watched. Beside him, Cole sat with a legal pad because Cole had started carrying a legal pad since the Mojave exercise, a habit he had developed for writing things down instead of just filing them in the version of the world he had already decided was true. At the front of the room, a hand went up. A young sergeant, first row, the kind of physical confidence in the set of his shoulders that Cole had once recognized as the signature of a real warrior. "Sergeant Bennett," the young soldier said. He said her name with a politeness that had something slightly challenging underneath it. The challenge of someone who has not yet been given a reason to fully commit to the room. What makes a warrior? The classroom was very quiet. Cole's pen was still. Walker watched Bennett. She looked at the young soldier. She held his eyes for a moment. Not a power move, not a contest, just the simple human act of making sure someone knows they have been seen and heard. Then she said, "A warrior is not the person who fights the hardest. A warrior is the person who understands what they're fighting for, what they're fighting against, and what the cost of getting it wrong actually is. A warrior sees the battlefield as it is, not as they need it to be. A warrior knows the difference between courage and noise." She paused. "Noise is easy, courage the quiet kind, the kind that holds a position when everything says to move, the kind that trusts a process. It doesn't fully understand, yet the kind that admits when it was wrong and keeps going. That kind of courage is the hardest thing I know." The room was completely still. The young soldier in the front row had stopped looking challenging. He was just looking. "Any other questions?" Bennett said. No hands went up, not because there was nothing left to ask, because some answers complete themselves so thoroughly that the questions that would normally follow them dissolve before they can be formed. In the back row, Cole looked down at his legal pad. He had written one line. He looked at it for a moment. Then he underlined it, not because it needed emphasis, but because it was the kind of thing that deserved to be underlined. The kind of thing that once you have understood it, you cannot go back to not understanding. Walker leaned over. He read what Cole had written. It was 5 words. "The battlefield doesn't care who's louder." Walker straightened. He looked at the front of the room where Bennett was moving to the board where the first lesson of the day was about to begin, where 32 of the best soldiers in the United States Army were about to have everything they thought they knew about warfare gently, precisely, and permanently rearranged. "I thought about the Mojave Desert." He thought about the tower. He thought about one shot at 2,400 meters in the dark, about ceasefire orders that use silence as a weapon, about a woman who climbed a ladder alone and spent 6 hours holding 12 people together from the inside out without ever asking anyone to notice. I thought about Cole saying I would not have passed her in the voice of a man who would spend the rest of his career making sure no one else made that mistake. He thought about a broken ankle and a last-minute substitution and the way the whole night had pivoted on something that had nothing to do with planning and everything to do with the kind of excellence that shows up quietly and does the work regardless of whether anyone expected it. And he thought about the desert, which does not forgive weakness and does not grant favors and does not care at all what you expected to find when you arrived. The desert only cares what you do with what you find. They had asked for a real warrior. They got one. She just didn't look like what they thought one looked like. And that difference, that gap between what they expected and what actually arrived, and what that arrival cost the people who underestimated it and what it gave to the people who had the humility to learn from it, that difference was the whole story. That difference was everything.